Welcome back, and I have a new camera setup, so this might be an awkward video. I don't really know yet. Hopefully I don't have to start over, but we'll see how this works out. I wanted to talk about INFJ complexity, getting into the roots of why we are complex thinkers. I think one of the biggest struggles I've had in life is just having this massive inner network of thoughts that is impossible to relate to my outer world. I think it's one of the reasons why INFJs are deeply misunderstood, because it's difficult for us to convey what's going on in our heads sometimes. I wanted to talk about some of the things that have helped me with being able to articulate, and also just trying to understand this incredibly massive inner network of gears and signals that I have going on inside of my brain. I like having psychology models to be able to do that with, and I think it's really important for INFJs to study psychology as well. Philosophy and all of these things, I think, just really help us with our inner worlds. In this video, I was going to make it very complex and talk about each of the models that have helped me on my journey of self-discovery. I think it's also really important for INFJs to read and read psychology books specifically, because it just helps us with our intricate thinking. I had a memory come up this week that also just illustrates how complex we are in the things that we see. I remember when I was 6 years old, my first grade teacher had us do this assignment where we had to go outside and draw a tree. It was this big, majestic tree that was in the middle of the playground. And I remember sitting there with my pen and paper and just thinking, this is a huge thing. It's very complex. It has bark, it has branches and roots, and I didn't think I could capture it fully. So it was a 15-minute thing where I was there's no way that I can capture this in 15 minutes. But it was weird because my friend next to me, when she was drawing, she just drew a stick and a bush on top of it. And she was content with that. I could not be that simplistic. I was there's just so much to this. I think INFJs see people that way as well, as just being very complex and intricate. And there's a lot to human nature. And trying to put it into a simplistic model is just really challenging. But I think psychology models really help with that. So that's why I wanted to talk about it in this video, because there's just so much that I've explored that I think was incredibly helpful on my inner work journey. Yeah, I'm just going to walk through 7 of these models that I've come across within this time of doing inner work, and how they helped me, and also just how they relate to the INFJ personality. The first one is personality typing, and it's funny because this is what has brought us all here together. I think you should really study the cognitive functions and introverted intuition specifically. I really loved learning about myself in this way, because having that as a dominant function is incredibly challenging and is just this massive, huge thing. Yeah, I just think it's helpful overall. We're very insightful people, and I would tag this to our insightfulness in that it's helpful to understand every person's personality to some degree and understand these distinctions and have these tools. So I think that's why we generally gravitate to them. The next one is depth psychology, and I think specifically Jungian psychology. I really loved studying the self, because I just feel I have so many massive parts of myself, from a mask to a shadow, that I have to explore. And I feel like a puzzle a lot of the times, especially when it comes to my shadow. I've always just kind of naturally and intuitively done shadow work. I think that's something that every person in this world should do. But it just made sense to me, I think, empathically, to look at other people and to try to understand what about them was triggering to me. So I think it's worthwhile to study depth psychology in general. And I think if you're creative as well, learning about the archetypes is really helpful. That one I spent a lot of time on, and I think every INFJ really should look into the generic kind of archetypes and everything about Jungian psychology. Next is the Big 5 personality typing. I really liked this one for understanding how distinct I am in certain ways. I think it's good to have this model because it shows where you land across the field of people out there. It gives you a percentile of where you land. And my guess is that a lot of INFJs would be really high in openness. I think I'm in the 95th percentile when it comes to openness. I like to talk about ideas, and I have a hard time with more opinionated people. So I really like this for understanding my rareness, my uniqueness, where do I objectively land in terms of how other people think. I think that one's a really good test to take. The next one that I studied is harder to condense in a single phrase, but it's internal family systems. I think this is really helpful for anybody who feels like they have like multiple conflicting parts that want to do certain things. Like one wants to do one thing and another wants to do another. I like seeing myself as having multiple parts. And I think it's especially helpful to see, like if you're an INFJ, to see how you are across time. I have a 7-year-old part, a 50-year-old part, and an 80-year-old part. And I like to like talk to each of them and try to understand what they want. I often feel like my whole self is just kind of scattered across time. It's a very unusual thing to describe. Yeah, I think it's just really helpful in general to see yourself as a system with a bunch of parts. The next one is not really a psychology model, but an astrology model. And I think it's worthwhile looking into natal charts. You don't necessarily like have to believe in all this, but it's very helpful to have a way to translate energy. When you're sensitive, you can feel other people's energy, and it's just nice to have this packet of patterns and like planetary archetypes in your internal world so that you can use to like translate whatever you're feeling or experiencing. So I actually spent a lot of time studying astrology and just like learning about it. I had a harder time, I think, just coming in with a science background to getting into this world, but you don't really have to believe everything about it to actually get something out of it. I think sometimes the communities out there can be kind of superstitious about this sort of thing, but I think it's really cool and like something you can dive into, especially if you're into archetypes and stuff like that. 6 is transpersonal psychology. And I spent a lot of time studying psychosynthesis. I really pair this well with like the idealist nature of INFJs. I feel like we always have this drive to be moving forward in our internal growth, like wanting things like compassion and service to others and all these like higher forms of being. I think it's good to have distinctions between your like lower primal urges and these like higher forms of love. I don't really trust anybody who doesn't have those distinctions. Like I think it's important to know the difference between lust and love. As an INFJ, I think it's really good to study that and just learn how to integrate those different parts of yourself as well in a way that doesn't like mask over your primal urges. Yeah, I studied Roberto Assagioli, I think is how you pronounce his name. He has a lot of good psychosynthesis books, which helped me a lot in my personal development journey. Last on my list has to do with growth and what it means to develop. I really like studying developmental models as well. So I spent a lot of time studying Ken Wilber's spiral dynamics. I think this one is really cool if you consider yourself like a holistic thinker and somebody who wants to like integrate every part of themselves as well. This is like a very complex subject, and I think it's really worthwhile to actually read these books. Ken Wilber has a lot of books, I think, that are like very advanced, and they just put to words things that I answer questions that I never thought to ask. So I think that's like a really good thing to study. There's so many developmental psychology models out there that it's impossible for me to like pick one, but I think Ken Wilber's is a really good one. Anyway, I wanted to be a little more informational and less personal in this video. And I hope it's helpful though, because I feel like as INFJs, we tend to be really drawn to psychology. So I thought I would just share some of the things that I've learned over the past 4 years. And yeah, I think it's good to add to your palette. There are like several other things I've studied as well, but this is just a sampling of the stuff that I got into. Let me know your thoughts. I'm very curious about the different things that you guys have studied as well. Yeah, drop your comments and I look forward to reading them. I will see you all next time.